Hello everyone, this is Tricky and welcome back to another top 10 video. I know that you guys are used to Pokemon fusions, but today we're going to be doing something a little different. Today we're going to be covering the top 10 most disappointing Pokemon. These are Pokemon who were originally hyped up, but unfortunately didn't live up to the greatness that we were expecting. As you can read by the title, I am not alone. TamashiiHiroka and I are coming together to share what Pokemon have disappointed us the most. Of course, we are sharing our own personal opinions, so if one of your favorites is on this list, I'm sorry. It wasn't intentional. But since we are sharing our 10, we would love to see what Pokemon have disappointed you, even if it's just a little bit. In the comment section below, list your top 5 Pokemon who have angered or disappointed you, and if it happened to grow on you, let us know that as well. Also, we did a second top 10 that you'll find on Tamashii's channel, so links are in the description and in the annotations. With all that out the way, let's go ahead and get started. Taking our number 10 spot is Goodra. I could feel the backlash already. I'm sorry. I know that a lot of people love Goodra and think it's a fantastic Pokemon, and it can be, but I feel like I probably would have liked it better if it wasn't considered a pseudo-legendary Pokemon. In every generation we get a pseudo-legendary, which are usually powerful, well-designed Pokemon. For those who don't know, they usually have a total base stat of 600 and have a 3-stage evolutionary line. We got Dragonite, Tyranitar, Salamence, Metagross, Garchomp, Hydreigon, and of course, Goodra. It looks so out of place to the point it doesn't even look like a Pokemon to me. It looks like it could pull off as a Barney or a Dragon Tales character. Of course, there's nothing wrong with these shows because I used to love Dragon Tales as a kid. Its battling skills aren't completely terrible, but they're not really that good either. Its high base stat does come in handy a lot, but it does get outclassed by a lot of other dragons. Plus, it's very slow, so it doesn't really help a lot if it gets outsped by every other Pokemon. Unfortunately, this Pokemon doesn't even have a Mega Form yet. I want to say that I was just expecting way too much for a Gen 6 pseudo-legendary, and I probably would have loved Goodra if it wasn't grouped with the others.
Number 9. Farfetch'd. Here's a Pokemon that's designed to be disappointing. In Pokemon Red and Blue, Farfetch'd was actually used as a lesson to teach players about the rewards of being a patient trainer. In Vermilion City, there's a house where you can trade a Spearow for a Farfetch'd named Dux. Spearow is a pretty common early game Pokemon. It doesn't have an awful lot going for it. And by comparison, Farfetch'd is actually a better Pokemon at that point in the game than Spearow. But if you go to raise that Farfetch'd, you'll find that by late game, it no longer really cuts it as a flying type. It doesn't have much going for it. If you had kept that Spearow and raised it, then it would have become a Fearow, which is one of the better flying types in the game. By design, Farfetch'd is there to disappoint you, and serve as a reminder that sometimes something's potential to be great is more valuable than just a momentary advantage. Farfetch'd comes in pretty low on this list because even if as a Pokemon it could never be anything but disappointing, it was a clever way to teach players about a complicated game, and subtlety like this in game design isn't something you see often these days.
Taking our number 8 spot, we have Aromatisse, or Aromatisse, or however how you want to pronounce it. When Spritzee was first revealed, I was so excited for it. It looked like a little fuzzy flamingo. It's a bird that I would love to see a Pokemon based off of. Finally, Koro linked its evolution, and you guys don't know the amount of disappointment I felt. It looks like a Pokemon that you would find on the corner trying to tempt you into something. There are a lot of fan-made concepts out there that would have been so much better than this. Spritzee and Aromatisse are actually based off of plague doctors, which are actually freaking terrifying. They're these creepy dudes who wore bird masks, and basically their purpose was to drown out the smell of the plague and the dead people. That is so scary, but they had a fantastic opportunity here, but they didn't do it right. They could have made it fairy dark or fairy ghost type. That would have been so much more fitting for a plague doctor, but instead they choose this little Aromatisse isn't completely terrible in battle, but it does get outclassed by a lot of the other fairy types. It just disappoints me because a lot of Generation 6 Pokemon aren't really used in competitive because they're outclassed by a lot of other ones. Oh well, we can't have our cake and eat it too.
Number 7. Togetic. When it comes to disappointment, often the more bitter experiences result from high expectations. In Togetic's case, it had a lot stacked against it. The Pokemon community was first introduced to Togepi back in the Gen 1 anime, and a lot of fuss was made over it. A Pokemon that wasn't even in the games? It must be really special, we all thought. Then when we finally got Gold and Silver, one of the very first tasks that you're faced with is hatching a Togepi egg. From the very beginning of the game, you're hampered with the thing. First as an item, and then as an unusable slot in your party. When it finally hatches, Togepi can't do anything. It's a weak newborn Pokemon with no attacking moves, making it really difficult to train. If you finally invest a lot of patience, time, and effort into raising it, only then do you get Togetic. Is it worth all that effort? Not really. It's not awful, but you'd think after all that build-up it'd be something really special. This is just okay, and a lot of the other normal flying types in Gen 2 are much better than it. To make matters worse, in the anime, Togepi doesn't evolve at all until the Gen 3 saga, and Misty has to carry its ass around for 300 episodes, taking her out of the action entirely and relegating her to a babysitter. It made my favorite character super boring, and guess what the payoff for all that was? As soon as it finally evolves and stops being an annoying paperweight, it leaves the show, and so does Misty for that matter. Thank God Togetic got an evolution in Gen 4 that made it actually worth existing. Otherwise, the entire line would be among my least favorite Pokemon ever.
At number 6, we have Palkia. I feel like I'm stepping on a lot of toes with this list, but I can't lie to y'all. I'm not gonna lie, Palkia has grown on me, but I feel like I should probably tell you this. When Diamond and Pearl first came out, I saw Palkia's design and it caused me to skip Generation 4. Yeah, a Pokemon who caused me to skip out on 3 main series Pokemon games probably deserves to be put on the list somewhere. Diamond and Pearl came out in 2006. Holy freaking crap, that's like 10 years ago. I'm old. And I was one of those kids who chose the box with the coolest looking Pokemon. While Dialga seemed cooler to me, Palkia didn't appeal to me at all. It looked so weird, plus it was supposed to be a water dragon type. And since I thought I was an edgy teenager, I skipped out on an entire Pokemon generation. Pokemon Pearl temporarily made me lose faith in Pokemon, even though I didn't play it, but eventually I did play it and I wound up loving it. But once a Pokemon fan, always a Pokemon fan. You say that you leave, you always come back.
Number 5. Alomomola. Of all the Pokemon that can use an evolution, Luvdisc is probably among those in the most dire need. All it has going for it is speed, but even with a base 97 speed stat, its total is still in the bottom 5 for all fully evolved Pokemon. So when Alomomola was shown as one of the Pokemon from the Unova region, back before Black and White came out, I was relieved to see that Luvdisc might actually be getting a little love. Imagine my disappointment when Alomomola not only wasn't an evolution of Luvdisc, but it wasn't even really much better than Luvdisc. This makes you think that they actually forgot Luvdisc existed, designed a Pokemon that looked just like it and thought, what a unique and original concept, let's put it in the game. And to make matters worse, its name is one of the stupidest in the Pokemon universe. It's a palindrome, but that doesn't really make sense with its design. It's not like if you flip it upside down it looks the same, so it doesn't really work. Girafarig is a palindrome that warrants existing, but this, it's hard to even say. Alomomola, Why does this Pokemon even exist?
I don't even know, but I know I can't even pronounce it. Moving on to number 4, we have Druddigon. This thing is freaking weird. Druddigon, or Druddigon, whatever, can actually be pretty good in competitive battling. But if you throw it against any other dragon who are actually good enough to be in the OU tier, it will be outclassed. Usually we get a pretty cool dragon-type Pokemon in every generation, and if we're lucky, we'll get more than one. I'm talking about common dragons, by the way, not legendaries. Flygon is simply amazing, Garchomp is great, Hexorus has an interesting design, but then we get to Druddigon for Generation 5. It doesn't have any pre-evolutions or evolutions either, so there's no real hype for this guy. I just remember using this dude to train my own Pokemon. It was kinda underwhelming that they didn't even give that much experience points either. I also forget about it a lot, and considering that dragon types are rare and supposed to be extremely interesting, it makes me sad that Druddigon is so forgotten. Maybe an evolution or a normal evolution will save it one day. You never know, in future generations they may be nice to us.
Number 3. Castform. Those of you who are familiar with my content probably know that I'm a big fan of using weather. Rain or shine, I love to build teams that work with the climate to boost their power and create great synergy. That's why to me, Castform is kind of a bummer. Castform is one of the first Pokemon that was introduced with moves and gimmicks that made specific use of weather, but to this day, it's still not actually viable on a weather team. Pokemon with really flat stats like Castform often have trouble finding a place on a team, because even if they don't have any glaring weaknesses, they're not really good at anything either, and a base 70 in every stat kind of sets you up for mediocrity. On top of that, for each type of weather, there are Pokemon that are more specialized that can really work better in those conditions. I want to love Castform because weather is one of my favorite mechanics, but it just doesn't really stand out as anything special. With all that build-up with the Weather Institute plot in Ruby and Sapphire, you'd think it'd be a lot cooler. Number 2. Unown. This is another disappointment I'd like to blame on the anime. In the third Pokemon movie, The Spell of the Unown, Unown are played up to be extremely dangerous and powerful creatures. They cause people to go missing in dimensional portals and create illusions that have enormous impact on the real world, which ends up actually endangering the planet. When the third movie came out, I hadn't played Gold or Silver yet, and this movie really built Unown up to be terrifying creatures. What a shock it was to discover them early game in the ruins of Alph, only capable of learning hidden power. I kept waiting for it to get good, to do something, for there to be some incentive to use it, but it never came. It was decidedly not a legendary creature that could destroy the world. Instead, it was in fact, at the time, the Pokemon with the 4th lowest base stat total for a fully evolved Pokemon in the game, and it could only learn one move. The Unknowns still do kind of have some cool lore within the games, but nothing that really measures up to the epic godlike creatures that they were built up to be in the movie. The reality of it actually being one of the worst Pokemon of all time was startling and memorably disappointing.
Now before I reveal number 1, don't forget to list the 5 Pokemon you think are the most disappointing. We all have different opinions, so it's always fun to discuss things. Also, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. So whenever the first X and Y trailer came out, I don't think I was ever that hyped for a Pokemon game in my life. I was so excited. We got 3 amazing new starters, Fennekin, Chespin, and Froakie. All of them were adorable, but at first glance, I already decided to pick Fennekin. It's a Firefox, it's cute, it's fuzzy, I needed it. I couldn't wait to see what its final evolution would be. I got even more hyped when they said its final evolution was gonna be Fire Psychic. On top of that, so many people were trying to predict what it may look like. Amazing ideas were shown, and then we get this thing. Delphox is one of the most disappointing evolutions to a starter I've ever seen. Froakie ended up with the coolest design that gained tons of popularity, while Delphox received quite the underwhelming design. People's fan-made designs looked way better than the actual canon. I'm sorry to those who actually like this Pokemon, but it's not even that good in competitive battling either. Again, no Pokemon is extremely terrible, especially if you know how to use it, and Delphox has seen tons of light when it comes to the battling world, but it does get outclassed by tons of other Pokemon. The Witch, Ninja, and Knight idea was freaking awesome. That was an amazing trio idea, but unfortunately they ran short. Greninja wound up being the most popular pick, and it was so popular that it got included into Super Smash Bros. I kinda like Chestnut too, but it's sad for them to be overshadowed, but if only Braixen received a cooler evolution, that would have been worth the wait. So that is our top 10 most disappointing Pokemon. I'm sure this was a very touchy subject, and I apologize, but again, list your top 5 most disappointing Pokemon in the comment section below. Don't forget to check out our second list. It is the top 10 worst Pokemon to have as pets, and you will find that on Tamashii's channel. Be sure to click the annotation or click the video in the description to check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!